Ед Џозеф, најпрво за надежите на македонската влада околу победата на Трамп. Тие надежи се најмногу финансиски и се однесуваат на некакви инвестиции од страна на американската администрација.
The answer is I have no idea. And only Mr. Grinnell can speak to whatever commitments he made or promises or encouragement he made about investment in Macedonian investment. I don't know how I can comment on that. That's completely. It depends on what commitments he made. It also depends on what influence and what role Richard Grinnell will play in the administration. So far, the top positions have been given to other names, those top foreign policy positions, but presumably he will be playing a role. And if he does, then hopefully he will keep his word and encourage the investments to come.
Видовме ентузијазам и во Србија по победата на Трамп и претходно, всушност, како и во Македонија, и еднакво се однесуваат тој ентузијазам се однесува најмногу на економскиот развој на оваа земја.
I think in Serbia it's different. I don't think the reaction in Serbia is only linked to economic development. I think there's a perception in Serbia that Trump is on the side of Serbs. That's the impression. And so I don't think in Serbia it's just a matter of investments. And it's very strange because I think under Biden administration, there was a lot of encouragement on Serbia, both for investment and also politically. Biden administration was very easy on President Vučić, very easy about on the domestic side. We had the famous case at the height of demonstrations in Belgrade last December over the elections when there was allegations of fraud. You had international observers there raising questions. The U.S. Embassy immediately said, we look forward to working with the new Serbian government. And there wasn't even a government in place. The elections had just been held. So it's all somewhat odd because there was no reason for anyone in Serbia to be upset with the Biden administration. Again, they went very soft and they were very big. The U.S. Embassy in Belgrade also very big on promoting U.S. investment.
Што мислите, Ед Џозеф, за поддршка на американската администрација на новиот председател Трамп околу спорот со Бугарија во однос на Македонија?
It's very hard to say. It's very hard to say what kind of a position, what kind of an interest the Trump administration would take on that. The last I remember from the current administration and from the State Department is that they were signaling no change. They were saying no change on the deal. I think it would be good if the Trump administration would take a second look at this EU deal that they struck, the so-called French proposal, and that they would look, and I think it would be very good if the Trump administration would listen to the concerns of the Macedonian government, which are legitimate, which is this question of whether you make the change to the constitution, putting Bulgarians in the constitution, and then Bulgaria asks for something else, and then asks for something else, and with the ability to block within the EU. So again, I can't predict on these things. It's simply not known, and I think I would question anyone who would make some clear prediction about the position of the Trump administration on that. Please.
Сметате ли дека американската администрација Трамп би дале поддршка на Македонија околу спорот со Бугарија?
Yes, I think, Liliana, that's a great question, and the answer to that is 100% yes. The Biden administration could have done it, and the Trump administration could do that. And I hope that they will look at that. I hope that they will engage on this issue. and that they will go to Sofia and speak to officials there and make it clear, look, the U.S. is not interested in steadily increasing demands on the Macedonian people, Macedonian identity, on the Macedonian government. We're not interested in that. We're interested in settling this matter. And one way to do that is to set up what I call this joint historical commission that would only come into force if Bulgaria raises the demands again. So it would be a deterrent. And again, it's a significant deterrent because the U.S. State Department, as I showed in my article on SICE Review, Johns Hopkins SICE Review, the State Department itself, in its own archives, has historical evidence of the Macedonian identity being affirmed by the United States and France and Italy and other powers after World War I. And of course, this undermines the core Bulgarian position, which is there was no Macedonian identity prior to 1944, prior to Tito. So I think it would be a deterrent for Bulgaria to try to raise demands after this constitutional change is made. And of course, the Trump administration could do it if they want to. Please.
Мислите ли дека вашиот предлог, вашата сугестија за формирање на некаква македонско-американска комисија би наишол на поддршка од страна на новата администрација на Трамп?
I think it's fine. As I understand it, the proposal is to pass the amendments, to pass it, but it wouldn't enter into force until North Macedonia gets into the EU, and I think that's a very solid approach. That's the most solid approach. The question is, would Bulgaria accept that? And of course, this is where hopefully the U.S. can be of help. But I think it's a reasonable solution. It's very fair, particularly if there's formal passage now in Sobranje, in the Macedonian parliament. And then it's just with the condition that this goes into force upon Macedonian entry into the European Union. And I think that's a reasonable and a very solid solution. Of course, it will take help to persuade Bulgaria to accept it. And they have a lot of political chaos now in Bulgaria.
Кој е вашиот став за одложено дејство на уставните измени? Тоа е предлог на новата влада на Мицковски.
Look, I would hope so. I would hope so. I would hope that the relationships that the ruling party in North Macedonia has now in Washington, these meetings, I hope that they can make their case. And I hope that the new administration will listen to the case. If anyone asks me about it, I will point to my articles and I will point to my support for these types of solutions and my own approach for trying to ensure that the changes that North Macedonia would make would not be subject to additional demands from Bulgaria, because that is a reasonable concern. That is a legitimate concern, and everyone should recognize that. The United States State Department should understand that that is a reasonable concern in Skopje.
Дали околу овој предлог одложено дејство на уставните измени влесна Бугарите во уставот, дали овој предлог би имал некаква поддршка од американска страна?
Of course, there are many theories on this. Let me say this, that I worked with others to make maximum outreach to Macedonian American voters, particularly in the state of Michigan, where Macedonian Americans are very numerous and a key part of the electorate there. And I would point everyone to the response, the statement that Vice President Harris gave to Voice of America on near the election, in which she said very clearly that the values of her administration, U.S. values, are to protect and recognize the rights of a country and its citizens to their identity, including specifically, she said, the Macedonian identity and language, and she said specifically the Macedonian language, and she said that she understands the interest and the concerns of Macedonian Americans on this. So Vice President Harris said that, and I'm hoping that that statement will serve as kind of a benchmark, that this is an expectation now. Even though she did not win the election, my hope is that this statement, now you've seen it, it's been all over the media, yes, in your country, that this will serve as a benchmark for all future administrations. Of course, the Trump administration doesn't have to follow it, but in a way it does. It serves as a benchmark of an expectation that that the U.S. administration does understand that and recognize the Macedonian identity, Macedonian language, and that these are not subject to external pressure and changes. And so that's what I'm hoping. And ask me again your question about the election, what happened.
Како гледате на изборите, на резултатите на американските избори, на поразот на Камала Харис и на победата на Трамп?
There are very straightforward explanations about this, and then there's very complex and often contradictory explanations. So here's the straightforward explanation, very straightforward. Mm-hmm. The majority of voters in the United States said that the U.S. administration was on the wrong track. Okay, we ask that question traditionally. Right track, wrong track. And most voters were saying the U.S. was on the wrong track. So if you are the current administration and the voters think you're on a wrong track, you are in the deficit. The advantage goes to the challenger, any challenger, not just Donald Trump. So that's the first point. The second point was that overcoming that, Vice President Harris had to present herself as the change candidate, okay? That she represented change, not President Trump. And I think she did it in the best possible way she could. The theme of her election was, we're not going back, meaning we're not going back to the divisions and divisiveness of the Trump era, that's not change, that's taking us backwards. And that was, I think, about as strong an argument as she could make. The problem is she had very little time to establish where she was different from the current administration, different from President Biden, and to establish her own identity. So that's the simple, straightforward explanation. And in addition, people didn't like the fact that inflation had gone up. So things like milk and eggs, you go to the grocery store, people pay more. And they're very sensitive to this. Although the reality is that the economy is very strong in the United States. Many industrial countries, they would like to have the economy, the growth of the United States, the low unemployment, and inflation has come down. But voters were not persuaded by that.
Што се случи со гласачите во Америка, Ед Џозеф, околу победата на Трамп, во врска со победата на Трамп? Дали мислите дека предоцна беше именувана за кандидатка Камала Харис и заради тоа всушност доживеа и пораз?
This was a complication because she came in basically appointed as the candidate instead of competing. So this was a problem. I think, if you ask my opinion, I don't agree with many of these critics who say, oh, she should have done this or she should have done that. I think in the time that she had, I think she ran a very effective and very strong campaign. She had a outstanding Democratic convention in Chicago, no problems whatsoever. And those can be very difficult. Many people predicted big problems in Chicago and big protests. It didn't happen. There were no big protests. And in Chicago, the size of the protest was not that sizable. And inside there was complete unity. She also convinced Republicans to come in. There were some prominent Republicans who supported her. And then finally, so in the one debate that they had in September, by all accounts, Kamala Harris won. Even Republicans were conceding the fact that she won. And she won so convincingly in that debate that there was only one debate. Donald Trump refused even to do another debate. Even she agreed that it would be on Fox News. She did an interview on Fox News. So she did a lot. But this is, again, it was fundamentally one of these wrong track situations. And the other thing is Donald Trump retains a lot of support that people didn't really fully appreciate. But he still retains a lot of support. And the reality is that he won, and he won in a convincing way.
Што велите за руската порака откако Украина ги искористи, ги употреби западните ракети? Русија кажа дека ова може да води кон нуклеарен одговор.
Vladimir Putin has been playing this card for a long time. He's been playing the card of nuclear, the threat of nuclear war. Oh, if you do this, it's nuclear war. And it's very dangerous to get into what we call nuclear blackmail. It's very dangerous because when you get into obviously nuclear war is catastrophic. Nuclear blackmail is also catastrophic because it gives the possessor of nuclear weapons the ability to make threats at any time. It also gives incentives for every other country, Iran in particular, to develop nuclear weapons and to have them and then use these again as threats. So what we've seen so far is that the threats that the Russians have made, the U.S. and its allies have crossed them. So they said they would not give tanks or F-16s. Those have all crossed. All those boundaries are crossed. The HIMARS, the very long-range air defense system, this also was provided. So all of these so-called red lines have been crossed, and we haven't seen Russia use nuclear weapons. And we should remember, once Russia uses nuclear weapons, then Russia are in a completely different situation because they risk the loss of global support, including from China. They risk that. And so it's also for Vladimir Putin a very risky question.
И на крај, моето последно прашање, Норвешка, Шведска и Финска се подготвуваат за војна. Кој е вашиот став?
I think it's very important for your viewers to understand just what a catastrophe Vladimir Putin unleashed on himself, not just on Ukraine, but on himself and on Russia by invading Ukraine in 2022. You know, Vladimir Putin has said for years, and Russians have said for years in the Kremlin, that NATO expansion was this big mistake. Obviously, this was not a mistake at all, anywhere, in any country, and particularly in the Balkans, and particularly for your country. It has brought Macedonians security, all Macedonians security. And it has the same it has brought to all members of the alliance. And what Vladimir Putin did with this catastrophic invasion, this raw aggression, was to do the most he could to expand NATO further. That's exactly what he achieved, because it was Vladimir Putin and only Vladimir Putin, by his decision, that caused Finland and Sweden to join NATO. And these are two countries that were proud of being neutral. And it was Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin, that convinced them that for their self-defense, they needed to join NATO. And it's further proof of what NATO is, not an offensive alliance, but a defensive one. Why would Finland or Sweden want to join an alliance that's going to get into some kind of big war with their neighbor when they're right on the front line? So that's proof that NATO is a defensive alliance, and it's proof that Vladimir Putin made a catastrophic mistake and is a very weak leader, and that's something all Macedonians should understand. And all Macedonian citizens should also understand the wonderful news today that former defense minister Radmila Shekarinska will be now the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. That is terrific news, not just for all Macedonian citizens and all citizens of the region, but for the alliance itself. I've known former Defense Minister Shekarinska for over 20 years, and I consider her one of the most outstanding leaders that I know in the entire region. He brings enormous intellectual capacity and experience and enormous personal integrity to the NATO alliance, and I know she will do an outstanding job as the deputy to Secretary General Rutte. So my congratulations to Radmila Shekarinska and to all Macedonians who can be very proud of this decision today.
Благодарам, Ед Џозеф, за овој разговор.
Thank you very much.